Hello, my extraordinary X-Men fans. It's Jerry Rasco here with you, and this is a brand new series that we're doing on the channel to look at all of the issues of well, for now, I'm going to call it the Uncanny X-Men, but when we get to the book, you'll see what I'm talking about. But the X-Men. So, starting with X-Men number 1, we're going to be reviewing the art in each episode or each issue of the X-Men and talking about what works, what doesn't work, what made it great. Um, how did we like the story? What did we think of the artwork, etc. As we evaluate and review these old Silver Age classics. So, first of all, thank you to everybody who is checking this out who may be new to the channel. If you are, there are 2 other series that we do just like this. One features the Amazing Spider-Man, so going all the way from Amazing Fantasy 15 all the way through. We're up into the 60s issue. I think 64 was the last one I just did. And then we're also doing a series on the Incredible Hulk, which is now in Tales to Astonish until it turns back into the Incredible Hulk book. But that's another series. You can see those playlists here on the channel. Yeah. Again, I want to talk to you if you're new. If you've already been here to the channel, thank you. I cannot let you know enough how much I appreciate everybody's support. The goal here is to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and every new subscriber is making it happen. We're making a great push, and we've gotten great numbers so far, but we want to continue that, and hopefully maybe bring in this series as well. We're bringing some new people. If you're already a subscriber, think about letting your friends know. If you know someone who's into comics, let them know about this so they can check it out themselves. If you haven't subscribed, click that button. It is free. And speaking of free, if you do, you can win free artwork. Now, with the other 2 series that I was doing, I have a Spider-Man piece of artwork that I created and an Incredible Hulk piece of artwork that I created. And the goal was to pick one lucky subscriber when we reached the 1,000 mark, and one person would win both of those pieces of artwork. However, I want to share the wealth. So what I've done is I've done another X-Men piece featuring the original X-Men team in their original team uniforms. So this is by me. You've got Cyclops, Marvel Girl, Iceman, the Beast, and Angel in their original X-Men costumes. And this is going to go to a second winner. So that's right. So we've gone from one winner winning everything to now there's going to be 2 subscribers that can win this. So if your odds are even better. So if you hit subscribe, you have a much better chance of winning a piece of artwork than you did before. And as I introduce even more series, we'll continue that trend. So if you like free art and you enjoy looking at old comics with me, go ahead, click that subscribe button, be part of the YouTube community that we're building here. So that said, we're going to look at we're going to look at the X-Men. It's not the Uncanny X-Men at this time. It's just the X-Men number 1. So let's jump over and take a look at the book together. So this is the cover to X-Men number 1. As you can see, it is just called The X-Men. It is not the Uncanny X-Men. So that comes later. You can see that they talk about it in the style of the Fantastic Four. So at this point, this is 1963. So the Fantastic Four is still a fairly new book. Spider-Man, I think we see an ad for Spider-Man issue number 4. So we're in these very early days of Marvel. And you have the story, of course, that Stan Lee told over all the years. Now, whether that's true or he eventually told the story enough times that it became true to him, his plan, he said, was he had reached his limit, right? He had people, superheroes created from science experiments, from radiation, from bugs, from cosmic rays, from all these things. And he had kind of run out of ideas of how to create new superheroes. So he just had this idea, what if they're just born superheroes? What if there's just people born with powers? And then I don't have to go through and explain how they got them. We can just jump right into the story. So that's supposedly Stan's plan when it came to the X-Men. There's a lot of stuff here that's really interesting. That is right from the jump exactly the way it ends up being and kind of stays. So, especially the costume designs and things. But let's talk first about the team. So, as I mentioned, you have Stan Lee writing. You have Jack Kirby doing the pencils, as he did pretty much all of the early books, with the exception of Spider-Man. And then you also have Paul Reinman on inks. So if you go back and look at my Hulk #1 issue or episode, I think we talk about Paul Reinman because he did ink the Incredible Hulk #1 over Jack Kirby. But just real quick, for those of you who haven't seen that one, Paul Reinman was a penciler and inker from the golden age of comics. So he was working in the 40s through to the early 50s. And was working for MLJ Comics, aka what eventually became Archie Comics. So he was a regular artist, a regular working guy, producing a lot of comics at that time. And then he moved to Atlas in the late 50s, right as it was turning from Atlas into Marvel. And Paul got the job of inking Jack Kirby. So he did work on X-Men issues 1 through 5. Avengers 2, 3, and issue 5, and the Hulk #1. So in terms of the early style and the early look of the Jack Kirby artwork, there's probably quite a bit of it that we can attest to Paul Reinman. So somebody you may not have heard of before. That's certainly what we've got here. We've got a Jack Kirby cover. I do want to point out, so these are scanned PDF copies of the comics. However, this cover is a digital recoloring. I don't know how far the digital work goes, but it is definitely a digital recoloring. So in the original, the green around the corner box, and this is not nearly as bright, or I'm sorry, is not nearly as dark. It's much brighter. There's no blue behind the X-Men. It's actually black. The costumes of the X-Men themselves, yes, it is yellow, but it's actually more of a bluish gray, because in theories we'll see inside, they're really drawn as yellow and black. For years, I personally thought it was yellow and blue as well. And when you get into like the X-Men of the 90s, you can see a lot of that brought back as blue and yellow are the colors of the X-Men. However, really, we'll see inside that it's really yellow and black, and that this blue coloring is more of a modern take on the original X-Men costumes. We have Magneto here in all his original glory. There's a little bit of recoloring done on Cyclops' blast. It's more of a fade from this light pink to red with some streaks in it. There was a little bit of that in the original. This gradient from this sort of purpley pink down to dark purple in the background, that did not exist. It was just solid red. Angel's wings are more blue here. So definitely a recolor, which is fine. My guess is probably they were unable to find a good copy that they had access to scan. So they had to use the digital copy, and that certainly could happen. But as we open up and you look inside, you can see, here we go. This is what it looked like when it came out in 1963. You get all your original ads, you get all of your printing, you get your any mistakes, the yellowing paper, all that kind of stuff. Exactly what it looked like in 1963. So I'm sorry, I talked about stuff on the cover here as far as what was different. It's a good cover. It is really like the classic. It's a classic group shot. So when you have a superhero team, when you put them on a cover like this, you want everybody having an action, everybody have something to do, sort of everybody having an opportunity to show off their powers. Now, with the exception of Marvel Girl, that's what's happening here. And certainly, while she may be in the background of the cover, she's not necessarily in the background of the comic. So I want to be clear about that. But we kind of get an idea of what people can do. So it's a real selling point right off the bat. So it's a good cover. The only thing that I have a question about is that the movement and the action is going from right to left, when usually you want to flip that. Traditionally, because we in the West, we read from left to right. That's how we read our words. We look at that as forward. Left to right is forward motion. And so what you'd want to do is kind of, in my opinion, you'd want to flip this maybe and have the action going to that bottom right corner, which leads your hand there to flip and open up the comic. So I find this a little bit strange that it would be going from right to left. I don't know. Maybe it's because you have this giant X logo, so you'd be cutting off a little bit of area, but not a lot. So anyway, that's the cover. Again, just to give you an idea as we go through this, good, bad, or indifferent, this issue really does help set up a lot of the tropes or it's the blueprint for team superheroes, for a team superhero or just a superhero comic. We have this original introduction of Professor Xavier in his mansion, and here comes the X-Men, and he calls him. So immediately we're getting into powers. What do people do? And like I noted, it's hard to believe that some of these costume designs have essentially survived this long, with tweaks. But in general, you see all the time with various X-Men designs, they go with this sort of either blue or black on yellow design with sort of, it's a like a under, not a leotard, but I guess like say like a jumpsuit underneath with sort of the shorts, the belt, this sort of yellow tunic over the top. Sometimes it's integrated, and then the cuffed gloves and what they call buccaneer boots, those cuffed boots as well. But I mean, you can go into 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, 2020s, and you can see this a turn or a twist on this motif, but the motif has survived all these years, and that's a real nod to the greatness of Jack Kirby, that he was able to present something that, you know, even with my piece of artwork that I did, yeah, it's those original costumes, but I'm drawing it in a more modern style, but it still holds up. They're really timeless, evergreen costumes. So that's really great. Now, let's talk about some things that don't work for me here. Number one, the perspective of the room is wrong. So it's hard to do. I wish I could trace it, but I can't. But if you follow the line under the window, underneath the beast here, and you follow where that line goes, it would end about here. So it's kind of a weird, like, it looks like it should end maybe over here, but again, there's no ceiling, there's no line coming down showing the corner, but there's definitely a corner because this is a different angle than this back wall. So that's a problem. That perspective is off. There's also a lot of tangents. So what I'm going to do very quickly, I've talked about this in other videos, but if you're new, I want to explain. I'm going to put up a quick image here, which will show you what I mean when you talk about a tangent. So it's just how two lines in different objects line up to the point where they blend together. So this is an example of how a tangent works and what it looks like. And there's very simple ways to fix it, as you can see in this example. So we'll go back to the comic. And when I talk about tangents, what I'm talking about here is this line from the wall and the line from the drapery kind of lines up with Professor Xavier's arm and the chair. So that's one example. This where the angel's wing comes over and sort of ends right as it touches the beast. So what's in front? Is angel in front of beast? Is beast in front of angel? They're almost, it's like the lines just blur and blend together. So that's kind of another tangent mistake there. And then the another thing that doesn't work for me is Iceman's slide, his fireman's pole. It goes nowhere. It stops here. It stops, and then we see the angel's wing behind it. If he's sliding down through a hole in the ceiling like a fireman, then the ice pole should go all the way through the ceiling, and it doesn't. It just sort of dies. So did he make a pole and then climb to the top and just spin around for funsies? I get what he's trying to do, but the visualization just doesn't work that way. And then another thing here, so we could tell where the light is coming from because of the shadows, right? That's always your telltale sign. So Xavier's sitting in this chair. There's a shadow underneath, and it's going out to the right of the page underneath. So that means the light is coming across the page from left to right, maybe slightly above, but in other words, the shadow is underneath the chair. There's no shadow from his feet. So this is a big problem that I have. So you see right here in this top image, let me zoom in. You can see exactly what I'm talking about, actually. Oops. Scroll over. Come on. Up and over. Okay. So here he is sitting here. So the light is coming from the left to the right. So his feet are casting a shadow. The chair is casting a shadow. His body is casting a shadow. There's a shadow underneath here. So that part is great. The lighting works there. It's simple but effective. And when you come down here, there's no shadow on his feet. Now, this foot is in shadow, but his feet aren't actually casting a shadow of them in and of themselves. Neither is the blanket over his legs. So this whole area down the bottom should be in shadow because of that. So last thing I'll note here, the beast is very bestial, probably more brutish and beasty than later. The feet and hands are huge, which is great. That stays. The furriness, the hairiness of the hands and feet doesn't quite stay. And then you'll see later how he speaks as well as a little more brutish. So now they're going to do some training, and this is where we start to see a little bit of the interplay between the characters. Again, just developing who's who. So I don't know if they ever say that Professor Xavier can't walk. Like they tilt his chair back. I don't know. We'll have to see as we go through. But that's the idea. He's covered up because he can't walk. I think it does say somewhere. But his his mental powers, his telepathy is what makes him a mutant and puts him where he is in his position. Iceman and Beast are more playful. Scott's serious. And here's where I mentioned, so the Beast, if you read modern X-Men comics, the Beast is a genius. That's the idea. He's a super genius. So that's the dichotomy. He has the body and the name of a beast, but he has the mind of a super genius. But here he's talking more like a beast. I like them, not I like them. Not tickling, not tickling. Wait till my arm thaws out. Stuff like that. So that's one of the things that, kind of does change. Yeah. So they're going to do their training session here, and each character gets, again, a little example of to show off how their powers work. Again, important for characters or for readers who have never seen these characters. They're brand new, so we need to give some sort of an example of how their powers work. So we see the Beast, and actually, for this one, my favorite panel here is this second one. This pose is terrific. This hand is very Jack Kirby, really known for putting hands towards the camera, manipulating those fingers and bringing energy out through the hands as well as perspective. So that's really nice there. Again, here's another tangent. The hand ends right on this loop. So we know he went through it. That's what these little shadows are to show he was here, bounced, 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 and now he's coming at us. So in theory, what you should do is this should be in front of the loop. If you put his fingers just overlapping that loop a little bit, it puts him forward in space, which is what we want. Instead, they're right on a line. So that is exactly the definition of a tangent. But this is a really nice drawing for a fairly small panel. Actually, very reminiscent of Walt Simonson, who did draw X Factor, which was a spin-off of the X-Men featuring the original members of the team here. And just there's a lot of stuff in here in this figure work, the line work, the kind of blocky shadows that very much remind me of Walt Simonson. Obviously, Walt Simonson came far, far later, but you can see. So we see the history, and we see the artistic influence that somebody like a Jack Kirby then had on Walt Simonson, who then had on Mike Mignola, who then had et cetera, right? So we can follow the chain and see how those influences travel through time. Another thing, real quick, Jack Kirby does an amazing job of moving his camera around. I talk about it all the time. The camera, when I refer to camera, that means the relationship of the reader's eyes to the imagery on the page. You cannot move the reader around in space. You can only move the drawing. So, example, we have a kind of standard ground level view. And then we go over here on the left-hand side on panel 3 is a down shot. We're looking down at the characters. So we see the top of the head, the back, because the beast is hunched over, so we see his back. That's a down shot. Then we cut to a little more of a close-up of Professor Xavier. Same thing here. We have a close-up of Xavier framing as the angel flies away. So again, just moving that camera around to keep it interesting. We're not just sitting in one static place and watching things happen in front of us. As a viewer, we're moving through the space. It's a way to integrate your reader into what's happening. So the angel's doing agility work as he's flying. One thing I noted, I don't necessarily like the wings, the way that Jack Kirby draws the wings of the angel. So there's supposed to be giant wings. And you think of like swan wings or something like that. And if you look at them, you can actually, obviously do the research, and you can see how the feathers of that play together. They're almost like very long fingers. And there's multiple layers, and they go from smaller to longer as they go. And sometimes you get that. Like this panel where they're kind of spread out isn't too bad. But then you get one here, and it's just sort of a bunch of lines. So they don't follow any real consistency in the feathering and how he draws the feathering. We have kind of, again, here, sort of lines. There's some long lines that come from the top. There's short lines that come from the top. Sometimes it looks more almost like furry or fluffy. Here, there's no real delineation between the layers of feathers. Some of it might just be, again, the speed. This is a time when people didn't have, like independent comics have today of months to draw a comic. You had 3 weeks to draw a comic. So sometimes you had to go quickly. But this is the angel piece here. And then Iceman gets a little action. So one of the things I wanted to note here is the other X-Men are being trained. And Iceman is complaining about how he doesn't get to train. So now he's going to be the jokester. And the whole deal is because he's 16, and Xavier says it here. Iceman is 16. Everybody else is a couple years older. So he's like, I'll never graduate. So that means everybody else is about 18. And just to give some perspective in terms of what happens here in the story later or throughout the history of the X-Men in terms of kind of putting them at an actual school with actual teens. And again, remember, 1963, the biggest market probably for comics at the time was teenagers. This is the whole idea. This is why we had to have the Comic Code Authority on the cover, because we wanted to make sure that everybody understood that this was appropriate for children. And so what do? You could have made the X-Men all 25-year-old adults. But instead, by making them 16 to 18-year-old kids that are talking about graduating from school and making Professor Xavier's Institute a school, helps to tie it in with the teenagers. And that's one of the strongest points of the X-Men. They've always been super popular with teenage readers because of all the themes and the relatability of the ages of the characters and things like that. Now, obviously, over the years, they've grown up, they've aged. But in these early days, they're always teens. And that's why you continue to get the reboot of the X-Men with the New Mutants, or I'm trying to think of the other young Gen X, or Generation X, or other young teams, young X-Men, I think, stuff like that. So they're always bringing in new students. So it keeps younger, it keeps a relatable character for younger readers. That's the idea. This shot of the Beast throwing a bowling ball at Iceman, which he uses a kind of an ice shield slide to fling it back, is very nice. That's great ingenuity of the powers. And the bowling ball coming at you is a very nice shot. That's great. And takes us through the panel well. So that's a great idea. Good shot there. Good perspective of that ball coming at us. And then there we go. And it comes back to Beast and he catches it behind his back. Now it's time for Cyclops, and his training is to fight his teammates. This so he releases his blast, and this is one of the things that people get wrong, but it's right here in the beginning. Cyclops shoots these optic blasts from his eyes, but he has the visor, which makes it look like one big wide eye, hence the codename Cyclops. But because it's red, people think it's hot, like he melts things, or he could weld things or burn through things, and he actually doesn't. It's force. So if you see here, you see the Beast is pushed into this sort of metal wall and sort of encased in the wall. That's because Cyclops beams are pushing. They're not a laser. And that's a big mistake people make all the time. Writers, artists, even other characters. You see it here as he's breaking Iceman's ice. Right? Iceman's encased himself in a box of ice. Cyclops is breaking it apart. Not melting it, but breaking it. And then they start kind of all wrestling in this panel, which it's good. I like the idea here of them all sort of fighting each other. They're all twisted up and stuff. But the drawing is very, very small. And it's very rough. And then there's something like, you see like the Beast is here, but the Beast is actually drawn. It's hard to tell, but if you look close, the Beast is drawn, I think, with what's supposed to be boots and gloves on, which he doesn't have, right? He's the guy who doesn't have boots and gloves, whereas Angel and Cyclops do. So that's a mistake there. Things are just drawn roughly, like the fingers wrapping around, like this thumb wrapping around Cyclops' calf and his shin is literally a square. It could have been done a little more definitively so you know what's what. This is Iceman's hand here, but it's kind of wrapped in around some Angel, and I don't know what this white over here is supposed to be. So all in all, I love the concept of the energy, but the execution's not as good as it could be. Xavier calls it off. This is a classic Kirby shot. And I mentioned this, I think, in a recent, I forget what it was. Oh, a recent cover that we looked at, Tales to Astonish. And I mentioned the Jack Kirby mask. So this is a great example of it. When Jack Kirby would draw characters like this, so whether it's the X-Men, Captain America, I'm trying to think of other characters that would have this sort of mask where you'd see their eyes. Not as many, but the idea is he would draw the eye like there's no space. The cloth is literally up around the lids of the eye, and you just see the eye behind it. More likely what you see in, again, more modern takes is it's a mask that opens up around the eyes and has, a piece that comes down around the face. But this is very, very Kirby-esque in terms of the eye, the way the eyes are drawn in the mask. The hand coming again out at us is a classic Kirby trope. And then each face is being drawn slightly different. So the Beast has more of a rounder, bulbous nose with a larger square jaw and bigger mouth. Angel has a little bit of a narrower face, with a dimple in his chin, and then Cyclops more of just a generic face. But he's making an attempt to make each face different, which, to be perfectly honest, there are plenty of artists that don't do that. They have kind of one or two male faces and one or two female faces, and that's it. But no, Jack Kirby was bringing individualism to each of his characters, so that was really nice. They stop their training because a new student has arrived, and her name is Jean Grey. So she arrives and kind of immediately jumps right in. And again, this is that opportunity to expand on what the X-Men are through through this conversation. So we've seen that they're superpowered people. Professor Xavier talks about why he calls them X-Men, because they each have an extra power, and they use the term mutant. So we see mutant there for the first time, and then Jean is also a mutant. So he introduces Jean to the team, and one of the things I wanted to note is they mention that Cyclops' name is Slim Summers. Now, if you're like me and you're a super nerd and you have read the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, you know that that is listed as one of his nicknames, Scott Slim Summers, because he's drawn much thinner. He's thinner than Angel. He's kind of a skinny kid. Again, going off this dichotomy, right? There's always this idea that like he's skinny in his body, but the power inside of him that comes out through his eyes is unstoppable. The Iceman is the hot-headed Joker. Beast actually is the genius. And then the Angel is just kind of actually the Angel. There's not really much about him. He's this beautiful blonde-haired rich guy, so he kind of fits the name. But that's the idea. And then they all kind of flirt with her a little bit, and she shows off her telekinetic powers. So she shows how she can move chairs, books, etc. with just her mind. And then Xavier mentions that he believes his powers came from his parents worked on the first atomic bombs, and so being exposed to the radiation is what caused their mutations. So he can read minds, and that's how that works. Oh, here we go. Yeah. So he very quickly mentions due to a childhood accident, which gets retconned much later, he's remained in a wheelchair. Through this series, we'll see later how Xavier does become paralyzed, but it's not a childhood accident. One thing I want to note here, again, for all the things that Jack Kirby is great at, this Professor Xavier study is very cool. Statue, clock, books, the built-in stuff, very, very nice detail. The mansion here, very, very nice. It's surprising. Unless you know a lot about architecture and stuff, it's hard to come up with those things out just piecemeal out of your head. I know when I've had to draw buildings like that, I've had to do research, and I have the internet. You didn't have that. So to come up with, the bay windows and where the fence line goes and how the windows line up and what part's brick and what part's solid, that's a hard thing to do, again, completely from your mind. So maybe this was referenced from something that he knew or had seen. I don't know. But, I mean, the background details are really, really nice. They're great. What he doesn't do terrifically well, in my opinion, are some of these female faces. So throughout this comic, we are going to see a lot of Jean Grey. She doesn't change expressions. This is pretty much what you get. There's one example of where she changes her expression a little bit, but pretty much this is what you get. And the question is, why is that? So one, you want, in comics at least, and in most art and illustration, your characters are going to be much more attractive than everybody in real life. That's the goal. This is all wish fulfillment. Your superheroes are stronger. Their muscles are better. Your women are more beautiful. They're more everything. So Jean, to draw your women very lovely, putting their faces in weird expression contortions might not make them look as appealing. The other part is, let's be honest, as every artist who starts out drawing and you start drawing human beings, you are your own model. You look at your own hands, you've looked at your own face a million times. So you're always going to have a little of yourself. So if you're a man and you're drawing women, it's always a little bit harder because you don't have that immediate frame of reference you can look at. So women are a little bit harder to draw for most male artists. Not all. There's some that just absolutely excel at it. And just like anything, practice makes perfect. But and I'm not saying Jack was starting off here, but as most artists are starting, they're going to be much more comfortable drawing sort of using themselves as reference. So that might be one reason. And then again, like I said, the other reason is just the expressions. But if you look through this, and some of it is 1963. She's a woman in 1963 in this story. Is she going to be as outgoing and expressive? Maybe she's going to be more demure, more quiet. But she lets her powers do the talking for her. So here's the one panel where we have a little bit of an expression. Hank gets a little forward and sneaks a little kiss on the cheek. And she's like, what? And uses her powers to teach him a lesson. And that's the most expression we get through this entire comic from Jean Grey. Again, if you go back and you, in my opinion, you look at my early Spider-Man issues where we talk about the Steve Ditko work, he draws such incredible, expressive women that it's just hard for me when I see something like this where there's no expression, because I know that, great artists can do it. So anyway, she sends him for a spin and throws him down and proves that she's just as tough and just as in charge as the other as the men of the team, or the other students. So there we go. And then we get to Magneto, and we see Magneto for the first time. And Magneto here is pretty much fully realized as what we see with Magneto. He's got the classic helmet. He's got the red and purple with the purple cape and the sort of bolted, neck piece on, and the gloves, the whole 9 yards. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put up 2 images to show you. These are actually, I'm sorry, I think I have 3 images to show you of classic artists who also drew Magneto. And you can see they drew them in this exact same costume. And again, most of, if not all, the details are here. So again, we've got the helmet, we've got the little wings on the front, we've got the cape, the purple, the gloves. So from John Byrne to Jim Lee to J. Scott Campbell, even though Magneto has worn a lot of different costumes over the years, as we see here back in the comic, this classic Magneto look has really stuck around for a long, long time. So again, this is just another nod to Jack Kirby's design sense that he's making costume designs that are timeless. And one of the things I did note is, like, again, the Jim Lee piece that I showed, I have that image as a poster literally on my wall right here. You can't see it, obviously, but I see it every time I sit at my computer. And there's the wing part on the helmet is moved down much lower in more down around more modern versions of this helmet. Whereas here, it almost works like devil horns. It's almost, especially from this side angle here, you see him as horns as opposed to like this flat sort of decorative thing on the front, which is what it becomes. And I kind of like that devil horn look. That's really cool and brings in an added element so we know Magneto is a bad guy right away. So Magneto starts messing around with the military. He's messing around with missile and rocket test launches. He's messing around with their guns of the people who are trying to protect the launch sites, tanks, etc. And some of this, you get some really good throughout this. There's some really good military drawings. I've mentioned this before. Again, I think in the early Hulk issues that Jack did, Jack Kirby was in the military. I believe he served during World War II, if I'm not mistaken. And so details of things like military uniforms, equipment, stuff like that is very accurate. So not only did he serve, but he also drew a number of war comics during the the 40s and into the 50s. So he's got that attention to detail that makes it feel not real, but makes it feel it adds a level of realism. Let's put it that way. So Magneto wants the base, and then this is another nice shot here. So this is, again, a great way if you're looking to be an artist and you want to draw your characters and keep things interesting. Again, as I mentioned, moving your camera around. So we're going to cut from the military guys here to Magneto in his base, and he's looking at his equipment. Now, we could have flipped the camera around and shown Magneto's face. We could have zoomed in from here and looked at him from behind and just seen him standing in front of this, whatever it is. But what we've done is pulled back the camera and used this wacky Kirby machinery, which he was, known for creating. Just weird angles, shapes, things that go together, but he uses it as a framing device. And there's enough overlapping to let us know this is in the front, Magneto is in the middle, the yellow is the background. We've created multiple levels of depth by framing the actual image you want with stuff in the foreground. So that's a really great way to do that. Just real quick right here, this is a tangent. This line of the bottom of this boot, I just noticed it. The boot lines up with the gun, and so all of a sudden now it kind of skews the space. So again, just something to be really aware of are tangents. So Magneto is continuing to move ahead, and now he's magnetically taking control of missiles. He's launching them without anybody being able to stop him, and now he walks into the base and is going to take it over. So he uses his magnetic powers to disable their weapons. He has a force field, essentially repelling using, positive and negative forces of magnetism to either, affect other things, repel things off himself as he's doing, sort of force fields, that sort of thing. So we can really see that Magneto's powers, the concept of magnetism, I'm impressed with how much it can do, knowing what we know now about magnets and how those forces are tuned into sort of the concept of electromagnetic concept. So electricity is tied to magnetism, is tied to, space and astronomy, and then geology, the spin of the core of the earth and the magnetic fields, and there's so much that it all connects to. And they really got a lot of interesting things in how you could use magnetism as a power for this, and it got a lot of it maybe not exactly scientifically right, but it was a really cool way of doing it. It's not just metal, which sometimes people sort of portray Magneto as more of a master of metal than magnetism, and not all metal is magnetic. So sometimes, it doesn't make sense. Now, here's an error. I don't know how this would have happened, because typically it wouldn't be now the way that we do it today, because of the way we do stuff with digital lettering, printing, etc. I draw all my panels and then color them and then add the lettering last. And because, again, of digital lettering, I'm able to maneuver it around, behind, over, through the artwork without it having to cover too much. A lot of times what they did here is the pencils would be done. They would letter it, literally paste the word balloons onto the artwork, then get it to the inker, say ink the rest of it. So otherwise, that way there's no point in inking stuff that's behind the letters. You already literally put a piece of paper over the top of it, and then coloring. So how could you have Magneto, who has this great speech and the standoff with the military, and then cover up the top half of his body in this giant word balloon? The word balloon would have been there pretty early on. So probably my guess is just Stan Lee was the guy who wrote this dialogue, and he was like, I got to have this dialogue here. Well, the balloon isn't, or the panel isn't big enough. Something's got to get covered up. And realistically, what they should have done is probably put it down here and cover up some of the feet, because listen, we're not paying to see feet. Let's see his face. But it's not how they chose to do it. So that's an example of a realistically bad lettering. You don't want to cover up the person who's saying the dialogue with their actual dialogue. That's not good. So the X-Men get alerted to the idea. Now, notice they're all in the exact same clothes they were. So except for Jean. Jean has changed into her school uniform. And the question here is, how long did this take? because everybody's wearing the exact same clothes they were before. So my assumption is this didn't take very long, but there's no way to know. If it is right away, then this line doesn't make sense. Jean says, "I never saw the professor like this before, so grim, so intense." Well, you've been there like hours, so how would anybody know that what the professor is like regularly? So maybe that line should have come instead of from her. Maybe it should have come from somebody else. But again, sometimes lettering has to go in the space you have. Anyway, I like this idea of Iceman puts on boots. So he just ices up his body and puts on the boots. And the way he's sitting on the ground pulling on boots, it just reminded me of like when my daughter was young and she was pulling on her shoes. She would just poof, plop down right on the floor and pull her shoes on, as she was little. So that's kind of what that pose reminded me. It's exactly what it looks like when a little kid pulls their shoes on. So I thought that was very good. So they head out to the military base. There's a few things here that are okay. I don't want to get too deep into it. There's nothing crazy in terms of the artwork. We see how does the angel hide his clothes? How does he hide his wings most of the time? So it doesn't really make sense, but again, we'll suspend our disbelief. Magneto has set up a magnetic force field around the base, and nothing can get through until the X-Men arrive. So here's this 18-year-old skinny kid saying, "Hey, I need 15 minutes." And the army's like, "Sure, why not?" So interesting that even as young as they are, they're still getting respect from adults and the military here in this case. So that's kind of interesting. We see again a little example of the powers. Iceman is freezing things up as he walks around, Angel flying through, Beast leapfrogging over a soldier, Jean Grey using her powers to lift somebody up, lift the guys out of her way instead of going around them. And then we get to the force field. And again, it's interesting. How do you show magnetic force field? It's invisible. Now, today, with our coloring that we have, we could do it with layers and line holds and different light colors where you could see the artwork through it and really show it using color. Back then, in this kind of printing, you couldn't do that. So we do it as these wavy lines, and it works just fine. It's a symbol for what we want it to be. So Cyclops is using his blast, and you can see where it bends the force field. It's a little bit on the crude side in terms of, illustration, but it absolutely works. And sometimes simple is better. So he has to go maximum power to punch through. And this part's a little weird. I get it. It's so powerful that you can't see his face anymore. It's just this blast of energy, which kind of wipes him out for a little bit. I don't know what these little dots are. I mean, I get it. It's supposed to be his head, but I don't think it's necessary. I mean, I think if you just, what I would have done is, you have the white, maybe just do the red line that's his eyes. So you would see just that red line inside the white. So you know that it's coming from those eyes, from that visor. But the little black circle as his head doesn't really work for me. It punches through Magneto's shield, and the feedback knocks him for a real big loop. So he knows that these guys, the X-Men, are nothing to joke with, and he's going to take it pretty seriously. He's going to use the missiles. So Magneto launches a bunch of different missiles, and he says that they're all heat-seeking missiles. But ironically, they're all sort of drawn a little differently, which I thought was kind of interesting. But anyway, nice shot of them coming at you, nice action lines, that sort of stuff. So good shot of that. Here's that ad I mentioned earlier for Spider-Man #4. So we can see, kind of give you a frame of reference of what else is happening in the Marvel Universe. So this is what we're looking at when we talk about a Steve Ditko issue of Spider-Man happening all at the same time here. Angel is in the air, so he's got to, of course, that the missiles won't be attracted to Iceman because they're heat-seeking missiles. So they're going after Angel. He's in the air. This is not great here. his sort of weird pose and because there's just not room. If he spread out the wings, it would cover up the missiles in the page. So kind of just tuck the wings in real tight, which I found odd. Like, I feel like they should always kind of be out and spread, because that's, that's the imagery. That's the cool thing about Angel, is the wings. And the instant you tuck them and kind of hide them behind him like this, it takes away from what they are, which is these cool wings. So good idea. The top down view, the down shot, seeing his back and the missiles chasing him, changing direction. And of course, Iceman using ice to ice up all but one. And then nice little, again, shot here of him dodging. So these are pretty, I like these wings here. These are good in terms of the layers and the different sizes of the feathers and the wings. I think that's really nice. And then Beast, they work together. Again, great. This is one of the things about when you're doing a superhero team comic book, it's very easy to get into what's happening with one character, and you need to be able to either transition from one to the other or show how they're working together. And that's exactly what we do here, right? So Angel to Iceman, back to Angel to Beast, Beast to Marvel Girl. And then we have Angel gets surrounded by metal. So Magneto's just going straight power. So he's just going to grab a bunch of magnetic ferrous metal objects and kind of pin Angel together with him. Again, more Kirby hands. Great example there of those Kirby hands. Always sort of twisted, always a lot of power and like tension in the hands, even if it's not necessarily in the body. So good hands there. Something to study. And then Cyclops blasts the metal apart. So the team is working together, terrific, but not, but they haven't stopped Magneto yet. This is a little strange. So, he knows he's in trouble. Oh, never mind. I get it. So I thought, this is where I made a mistake. I didn't understand. I thought this thing, so he pushes it. It's a container of rocket fuel that's on fire. I didn't realize that this is this same thing. So he's hiding behind it. And the only way you know is from the color, because this doesn't say anything like rocket fuel on it or anything like that. So you have to go, aha, he was hiding behind it. It's not on fire. Somehow he managed to set it on fire, which we don't know how. So, but at first I was like, oh, this is some sort of a tanker. And I thought he's using his magnetic powers to maneuver it, but then that would make Magneto way too big, right? If this is a fuel tanker. But it's not. It's this small container for some reason. This one I think is interesting. So Iceman, my thought would be freeze this, put out the fire, right? Cool it down, try to freeze it solid, put out the fire. Instead, he makes an ice shield for all of them to get behind and lets the thing explode anyway. So I don't know if, I mean, it works, so there's no wrong answer here, but I found it interesting for me as a writer. There's a dangerous thing on fire. I have a guy who can make ice. Why wouldn't I have him freeze it? And then maybe it could still explode, but if it's contained in ice, maybe it wouldn't be so bad if he couldn't. Anyway, last thing on this page, they forgot the front part on Magneto's helmet, the little shield with the little wings, whatever they are. That part was left off. So whoopsie. And then he thinks they've blown up, but no, they're underground. So Cyclops, under this ice shield, Cyclops bore a tunnel through the ground with his optic beams, with his blasts, again, because it's not heat, and that allowed them to escape and then climb back out. I like the imagery of them climbing out isn't great, and again, it's too small. But I like this shot of Magneto turning as Cyclops' blast comes up through the ground, knocking the rubble away. Very Kirby Rubble. Tends to be sharp, edgy, but not square. So always off a little, but very chunky and kind of harder edge with his rubble. But this is a nice shot of it in front, Magneto behind. So good framing. Again, good depth and a nice reaction to what's happening with Magneto turning. And then the X-Men come and get him. And then he was like, all right, I'm out. And he flies away and he puts a barrier between them so he can escape before they can catch him. The X-Men come back. All right, we're all done. And here we have the first mention of Uncanny. So as we start off this whole thing, we mentioned, hey, it's not called the Uncanny X-Men, not yet. It's just called the X-Men. And here we see Uncanny being mentioned. So they did all this in less than 15 minutes. So nice. So that Uncanny sticks. And we'll have to see as we continue through this series, when does the book go from just being the X-Men to the Uncanny X-Men? And then right at this point, hey, the U.S. military is like, we appreciate it. Thank you for your help. We respect you. You're honored guests. I honor your service to your country, basically. Eventually, as we will find out, obviously they become feared and hated. And the military is always after the X-Men. But at this point, or their first mission, everybody is happy. And that's it. And they fly home. And that, my friends, is the end of X-Men #1. So we're going to cut over to the desk and quickly wrap everything up. So that's X-Men #1. Jack Kirby does a great job of really setting the tone and the template for not just team superhero books, but superhero, issue 1 origin story superhero books moving forward. We see this all the time, as we're introduced to a new team. There's some folks who want to start at the very beginning and show how everybody gets their powers and that sort of stuff. Or I think the more popular kind of storyline is to bring everybody together immediately through action, through a mission. You establish what their powers are, you establish their goals, you establish who the villain is. So X-Men has it all. And again, from 1963, this is really setting the standard that we all have followed since then. So for that fact alone, there's some things that are a little wonky, a little tough to get through. Not all the artwork is Jack Kirby's best, but I'm giving this an 8 out of 10 on my ranking scale, just because, again, of it has that framework. It is the template for superhero comics that we all came to follow after. So without this, without X-Men #1 walking, there is no 1991 X-Men #1 selling 8 million copies. So that's my take on X-Men #1. I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't seen this book before, hopefully this was a fun view for you back into the past to see where these characters came from. So thank you for your time. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you really enjoyed it. Think about clicking that subscribe button. And don't forget the notifications either, because you want to know next time, this same time next week, when we come back here with more X-Men. Thanks.